What if I told you that everything you think you know about thinking is wrong? That the very processes your brain uses to make decisions, solve problems, and navigate life are systematically sabotaging your success. Right now, as you listen to this, your mind is filtering, distorting, and manipulating information in ways you're completely unaware of. You think you're being logical, rational, and smart. But in reality, you're trapped in mental prisons that keep you stuck, struggling, and settling for mediocrity. Here's the brutal truth that most people will never accept. Your brain is not designed for success in the modern world. It's designed for survival in a world that no longer exists. The same mental shortcuts that kept your ancestors alive are now the exact reasons why you make bad decisions, fall for obvious lies, and sabotage your own potential. But here's what separates the top 1% from everyone else. They've learned to think about thinking. They've mastered the art of critical thinking. And it's given them an unfair advantage in every area of life. Critical thinking isn't just an academic skill. It's the ultimate superpower for personal transformation. When you master how your mind works, when you can see through deception, cut through confusion, and make decisions based on reality instead of emotion, everything changes. Your relationships improve because you can see people's true motivations. Your career accelerates because you can solve complex problems others can't even understand. Your finances grow because you can spot opportunities and avoid traps that destroy most people. By the end of this audiobook, you will have rewired your brain for clear, powerful thinking. You will possess mental tools that most people don't even know exist. But more importantly, you will have the mindset that transforms ordinary people into extraordinary achievers. This isn't just about being smarter. This is about becoming unstoppable. Chapter 1. The hidden prison of your mind. Your mind is lying to you right now, not intentionally, not maliciously, but systematically and completely. Every single thought you think, every decision you make, every belief you hold is being filtered through mental systems that distort reality. And the most dangerous part? You have no idea it's happening. Scientists have identified over 180 cognitive biases, systematic errors in thinking that affect every human being on Earth. These aren't occasional mistakes or lapses in judgment. These are hardwired flaws in the very architecture of human cognition. They operate below the level of consciousness, shaping your perceptions and decisions without you ever realizing it. Take confirmation bias, perhaps the most destructive force in human thinking. Your brain doesn't seek truth. It seeks confirmation. Once you believe something, your mind becomes a heat-seeking missile for information that supports that belief and a deflection shield against anything that challenges it. You think you're being objective, but you're actually living in a reality bubble of your own creation. Consider anchoring bias. The first piece of information you receive about any topic becomes an anchor that pulls all subsequent thinking toward it. Real estate agents exploit this ruthlessly. They show you an overpriced house first, not because they expect you to buy it, but because it makes every other house seem reasonable by comparison. Your brain can't help but use that first price as a reference point. Then there's the availability heuristic. Your mind judges the likelihood of events based on how easily you can remember examples. This is why people overestimate the danger of plane crashes and underestimate the risk of heart disease. Plane crashes make headlines and create vivid memories. Heart disease kills quietly and consistently. So, it doesn't register as a major threat. The Dunning-Kruger effect reveals another cruel irony of human cognition. The less you know about a topic, the more confident you feel about your knowledge. True expertise comes with humility because experts understand the vast complexity of their fields. But beginners, blinded by their ignorance, feel supremely confident in their shallow understanding. Social proof bias makes you conform to the crowd, even when the crowd is obviously wrong. The famous Asch experiments proved this conclusively. When surrounded by people giving clearly incorrect answers, most participants went along with the group rather than trust their own eyes. Your need to belong overrides your need to be right. Authority bias makes you defer to people in positions of power, even when their authority has nothing to do with their expertise on the topic at hand. A famous actor's opinion on climate change carries weight not because of their scientific knowledge, but because of their celebrity status. The sunk cost fallacy keeps you trapped in bad situations because you've already invested time, money, or energy. You stay in toxic relationships, dead-end jobs, or failing businesses not because the future looks promising, but because you can't bear to write off your past investment. Pattern recognition, one of humanity's greatest strengths, becomes a weakness when it creates false patterns. Your brain is so eager to find connections that it sees them everywhere, even when they don't exist. This is why superstitions persist, why conspiracy theories flourish, and why people believe in luck. The framing effect shows how the same information can lead to completely different conclusions depending on how it's presented. Surgeons know that patients are more likely to choose a procedure described as having a 90% survival rate than one with a 10% mortality rate, even though these are identical statistics. Loss aversion makes you fear losing what you have more than you desire gaining something equivalent. This is why people stay in mediocre situations rather than risk change, why they hold on to declining investments too long, and why they make decisions based on avoiding loss rather than maximizing gain. But here's the most insidious part of all these biases. They feel like rational thinking. When you're in the grip of confirmation bias, it feels like you're being logical and evidence-based. When anchoring bias influences your decisions, it seems like you're making reasonable comparisons. Your biased thinking doesn't feel biased. It feels like clear, obvious truth. This is the hidden prison of your mind. You're not free to think clearly because your thinking is controlled by systems you don't understand and can't see. Every day, these invisible forces shape your decisions, limit your possibilities, and keep you trapped in patterns that prevent growth. Most people live their entire lives in this prison, never realizing they're trapped. They make the same thinking errors over and over, wondering why they can't break through to the next level of success and fulfillment. They blame external circumstances, other people, or bad luck, never understanding that the real problem is the faulty software running in their heads. But recognition is the first step toward freedom. Once you understand how these mental systems operate, you can begin to work around them, compensate for them, and eventually transcend them. Critical thinking is the key that unlocks this prison and sets your mind free. Chapter 2. The Neuroscience of Clear Thinking. Your brain is not a computer, despite what popular metaphors suggest. It's not a rational decision-making machine designed to process information objectively and reach logical conclusions. Understanding what your brain actually is and how it actually works is crucial for developing critical thinking skills that transform your life. Neuroscientist Antonio Damasio discovered something that shattered our understanding of rational thinking. He studied patients with damage to the emotional centers of their brains. These people retained their logical reasoning abilities, could perform complex calculations, and showed no decline in IQ. But they became terrible decision-makers. Without emotional input, they would spend hours debating whether to use a blue pen or a black pen, unable to choose between equally logical options. This revealed a fundamental truth. Emotion and reason are not opposites. They're partners in the decision-making process. Your prefrontal cortex, the brain's executive center, doesn't work in isolation. It's constantly communicating with your limbic system, the emotional brain, integrating feeling and thinking into a unified response. But here's where most people go wrong. They believe that good thinking means suppressing emotion and relying purely on logic. This is not only impossible, it's counterproductive. The goal isn't to eliminate emotion, but to understand how emotion influences thought and to use both systems effectively. Your brain operates on two primary systems, popularized by psychologist Daniel Kahneman as System 1 and System 2. System 1 is fast, automatic, and intuitive. It processes information instantly, makes split-second judgments, and operates largely outside conscious awareness. System 2 is slow, deliberate, and analytical. It requires effort, consumes mental energy, and handles complex reasoning tasks. System 1 thinking is incredibly powerful and necessary. It allows you to recognize faces instantly, understand language effortlessly, and navigate familiar environments without conscious thought. But it's also the source of most cognitive biases. System 1 jumps to conclusions, makes assumptions, and substitutes easy questions for hard ones. System 2 thinking is where critical thinking happens. It can override System 1's automatic responses, question assumptions, and work through complex problems systematically. But System 2 is lazy. It requires significant mental effort, and your brain tries to avoid that effort whenever possible. The key to critical thinking mastery is learning to engage System 2 when it matters most. This requires understanding the specific conditions that trigger biased thinking and developing strategies to pause, reflect, and analyze before making important decisions. Neuroplasticity research reveals that your brain can literally rewire itself based on how you use it. Every time you practice critical thinking, you strengthen the neural pathways associated with clear reasoning. Every time you catch yourself in biased thinking and correct it, you build mental muscle that makes future critical thinking easier. The anterior cingulate cortex plays a crucial role in this process. This brain region monitors conflicts between different mental systems and signals when your automatic thinking might be wrong. Some people have naturally higher activity in this area, making them naturally more skeptical and analytical. But this activity can be increased through practice and training. Mirror neurons, originally discovered in macaque monkeys, help explain why social influences have such powerful effects on thinking. These neurons fire both when you perform an action and when you observe someone else performing the same action. They create automatic empathy and imitation, which can be valuable for learning but dangerous for independent thinking. The default mode network, active when your mind is at rest, shapes how you perceive yourself and your place in the world. This network can either support clear thinking by providing space for reflection and insight, or it can trap you in repetitive, biased thought patterns. Learning to observe and influence your default mode activity is crucial for mental transformation. Dopamine, often misunderstood as the pleasure chemical, is actually the anticipation and learning chemical. It drives you to seek information and rewards, but it can also make you vulnerable to confirmation bias and addictive thinking patterns. Understanding how dopamine influences your information-seeking behavior helps you maintain objectivity. Stress hormones like cortisol dramatically affect thinking quality. Under stress, your brain shifts resources away from the prefrontal cortex toward the amygdala, the fear center. This makes you more reactive, less analytical, and more likely to rely on mental shortcuts. Managing stress is not just important for health, it's essential for clear thinking. The neuroscience of critical thinking reveals that changing how you think literally changes your brain. Every moment of conscious, deliberate analysis strengthens neural pathways that support better decision-making. Every time you question your assumptions, you build mental flexibility. Every time you seek out disconfirming evidence, you develop intellectual courage. This is why critical thinking is not just a skill but a transformative practice. As you develop these abilities, you're not just learning new techniques, you're rebuilding your mind at the neurological level. You're creating a brain that naturally tends toward truth, accuracy, and wisdom rather than bias, error, and delusion. Chapter 3. Destroying the illusion of certainty. One of the most dangerous enemies of critical thinking is the illusion of certainty. Human beings crave certainty. We want to know that our beliefs are correct, our decisions are right, and our understanding of the world is accurate. But this craving for certainty blinds us to the complexity of reality and makes us vulnerable to manipulation, poor decisions, and missed opportunities. The truth is that certainty is largely an illusion. The world is complex, ambiguous, and constantly changing. Most of the things you feel certain about are actually probability estimates disguised as facts. Your brain creates the feeling of certainty to help you function, but this feeling often has little relationship to actual accuracy. Consider something as basic as your memories. You probably feel certain about many things that happened in your past. But research by memory expert Elizabeth Loftus shows that memories are not recordings, they're reconstructions. Every time you remember something, you slightly change it. False memories can feel just as certain as real ones. People have been absolutely convinced they witnessed events that never happened. Your perceptions, which feel immediate and direct, are actually complex constructions. Your brain receives fragmentary sensory data and fills in the gaps based on expectations and past experience. You think you see reality, but you actually see your brain's interpretation of limited and ambiguous information. Scientific knowledge, often held up as the gold standard of certainty, is actually built on provisional understanding that constantly evolves. What scientists were certain about 50 years ago has often been overturned by new discoveries. This doesn't make science unreliable. It makes it honest about the limitations of knowledge. The stock market provides a perfect example of the illusion of certainty in action. Experts make confident predictions about future market movements, and investors make decisions based on these predictions. But studies consistently show that expert predictions perform no better than random chance over time. The certainty is fake, but the consequences of decisions based on that fake certainty are very real. Political beliefs offer another arena where the illusion of certainty causes tremendous damage. People on all sides of political issues feel absolutely certain that their positions are correct and their opponents are wrong. They seek out information that confirms their beliefs and dismiss contradictory evidence as biased or fake. This certainty makes productive dialogue impossible and democracy dysfunctional. Relationship certainty can be equally dangerous. People stay in relationships that are clearly not working because they're certain that things will improve. They avoid having difficult conversations because they're certain they know how their partner will respond. They make major life decisions based on assumptions about their partner's feelings and motivations without actually checking if those assumptions are accurate. Career certainty keeps people trapped in situations that don't serve them. They're certain that changing jobs is too risky, that they don't have the skills for something better, or that their industry is the only one where they can succeed. This certainty prevents them from exploring opportunities and growing beyond their current limitations. Financial certainty leads to devastating mistakes. People are certain that real estate always increases in value, that their retirement savings are safe, or that they'll always be able to earn their current income. These certainties make them vulnerable to market crashes, economic downturns, and personal setbacks. The certainty trap operates through several psychological mechanisms. Overconfidence bias makes you more certain of your judgments than accuracy warrants. The more difficult a question, the more overconfident people tend to be. Confirmation bias seeks out evidence that supports your existing certainties while avoiding information that might challenge them. The coherence illusion makes sets of beliefs feel more certain when they hang together logically, even if they're based on faulty premises. Your mind creates a coherent story from fragmentary information, and the coherence of that story creates false confidence in its accuracy. Binary thinking reduces complex issues to simple either-or choices, creating artificial certainty about situations that are actually nuanced and multifaceted. Instead of acknowledging that most real-world situations involve trade-offs and gray areas, binary thinking forces everything into black and white categories. Breaking free from the illusion of certainty requires developing comfort with uncertainty, ambiguity, and complexity. This doesn't mean becoming paralyzed by doubt or abandoning all beliefs. It means holding beliefs lightly, remaining open to new information, and acknowledging the limitations of your knowledge. Intellectual humility is the antidote to false certainty. It's the recognition that your understanding is limited, your perceptions are fallible, and your beliefs might be wrong. This humility doesn't make you weak, it makes you adaptable, learning-oriented, and resistant to manipulation. Probabilistic thinking replaces false certainty with realistic estimates. Instead of thinking in terms of definitely true or definitely false, you learn to think in terms of likely, unlikely, and degrees of confidence. This approach is more accurate and leads to better decisions. The practice of steel manning, articulating the strongest version of opposing arguments, helps break down false certainty by showing you the legitimate points your opponents make. When you can argue effectively for positions you disagree with, you understand the complexity of issues more deeply. Destroying the illusion of certainty is uncomfortable, but it's liberating. When you're not trapped by false certainties, you become free to explore, learn, and grow. You make better decisions because they're based on realistic assessments rather than wishful thinking. You build stronger relationships because you're curious about others rather than certain you already know them. Most importantly, destroying false certainty opens your mind to possibilities you couldn't see before. When you're certain you know how the world works, you stop looking for new opportunities and solutions. When you embrace uncertainty, you stay alert, flexible, and ready to capitalize on whatever emerges. Chapter 4. The Art of Questioning Everything. Questions are the most powerful tools in the critical thinker's arsenal. But most people are terrible at asking questions. They accept surface explanations, assume they understand situations they don't, and mistake their first impressions for deep insights. Learning to question everything, including your own assumptions, is perhaps the most important skill you can develop for transforming your mind and your life. The power of questioning lies not just in the answers it reveals, but in how it changes your relationship with information and reality. When you become genuinely curious rather than defensively certain, you open yourself to learning, growth, and breakthrough insights that were previously invisible. Start by questioning your own motivations and assumptions. Most people never examine why they believe what they believe. They inherit beliefs from family, culture, and peer groups, without ever subjecting them to critical scrutiny. Ask yourself, why do I believe this? What evidence supports this belief? What evidence contradicts it? How did I come to hold this position? What would I need to see to change my mind? Question the source of your information. In our information-saturated world, the quality of your thinking depends heavily on the quality of your inputs. Who is telling you this? What are their motivations? What expertise do they have? What biases might they have? Are they trying to sell you something, convince you of something, or manipulate your emotions? Question timing and context. Information that might be accurate in one situation can be completely wrong in another. Economic advice that worked in the past might fail in current conditions. Relationship strategies that work for some personality types might backfire with others. Always ask, is this relevant to my specific situation? Have circumstances changed since this advice was given? Question statistical claims and generalizations. Numbers can lie as easily as words, especially when presented by people with agendas. What exactly is being measured? How was the data collected? What's the sample size? Are there confounding variables? What about survivorship bias? Are we only seeing the successful cases while the failures remain invisible? Question. Emotional appeals and fear-based arguments. When someone is trying to make you afraid, angry, or excited, they're often trying to bypass your rational thinking. Ask, what emotion is this designed to trigger? How might that emotion be clouding my judgment? What would I think about this if I were completely calm and detached? Question expert opinions, even from legitimate experts. Expertise in one area doesn't translate to expertise in another. Medical doctors aren't necessarily financial experts. Successful business people aren't automatically relationship gurus. Ask, what specific expertise does this person have in this exact area? How do their opinions compare to other experts? Are they speaking within their area of competence? Question popular wisdom and conventional thinking. The fact that everyone believes something doesn't make it true. History is full of widely accepted beliefs that turned out to be completely wrong. Ask, why does everyone believe this? Who benefits from this belief being widespread? What would happen if this common wisdom were wrong? Question your own success and failure stories. The explanations you give for your achievements and setbacks are often heavily biased. You attribute success to your skills and hard work, while blaming failures on external circumstances. Ask, what role did luck play in my success? What did I contribute to my failures? What patterns am I not seeing? Question binary choices and false dilemmas. Most real-world situations offer more than two options, but human thinking naturally gravitates toward either-or scenarios. Ask, what other options exist? Is this really an either-or situation? What would a third alternative look like? What are the assumptions that make this seem like only a two-choice scenario? Question your goals and desires. Many people pursue goals they've never really examined, chasing success definitions imposed by others rather than choosing what actually matters to them. Ask, why do I want this? Is this actually my goal or someone else's expectation? What would happen if I achieved this? How would I feel if I never achieved it? Question the stories you tell yourself about other people's motivations and behavior. Your brain automatically creates explanations for why people act as they do. But these explanations are often based on limited information and heavy projection. Ask, what other explanations could account for this behavior? What don't I know about this person's situation? How might my own biases be shaping my interpretation? The Socratic method provides a systematic approach to questioning. Named after the ancient Greek philosopher Socrates, this method involves asking a series of probing questions to examine beliefs and reveal assumptions. What do you mean by that? How do you know this? What evidence supports this? What are the implications if this is true? What are the implications if this is false? Powerful questions often start with "what if?" rather than "why?" Why questions often lead to justification and defensiveness. What if? Questions open up possibilities and encourage exploration. What if the opposite were true? What if I'm missing something important? What if this problem is actually an opportunity? What if my assumption is wrong? The 5 Whys technique, originally developed by Toyota for quality improvement, can be applied to any belief or decision. Keep asking why until you reach the root assumption. You believe you should work harder to succeed. Why? Because successful people work hard. Why do you believe that? Because that's what you've always been told. Why do you believe what you've been told? Continue until you reach bedrock assumptions that you can examine critically. Learning to question everything doesn't make you cynical or paralyzed by doubt. It makes you more discerning, more accurate in your judgments, and more effective in your actions. When you base decisions on thoroughly examined information rather than unquestioned assumptions, you make better choices and get better results. The art of questioning transforms you from a passive receiver of information into an active seeker of truth. It changes you from someone who accepts reality as presented into someone who investigates reality as it actually island. This shift in perspective is the foundation of critical thinking mastery and personal transformation. Chapter 4. Sophisticated mental model toolkits that give them enormous advantages in every area of life. Think of mental models as lenses for seeing the world. Just as different camera lenses reveal different aspects of a scene, wide angle for context, telephoto for detail, macro for close-up work, different mental models reveal different aspects of any situation. The more models you have and the better you understand when to use each one, the clearer your thinking becomes. The map is not the territory, but maps are essential for navigation. Mental models are maps of reality, simplified representations that help you understand and predict complex systems. Like all maps, they're incomplete and imperfect. But a good map is better than no map, and multiple maps give you multiple perspectives on the same terrain. One of the most powerful mental models is systems thinking. Most people think linearly. A causes B causes C. But reality is full of complex systems where everything influences everything else through feedback loops, delays, and emergent properties. Understanding systems helps you see connections others miss and avoid solutions that create bigger problems. The Pareto principle, also known as the 80-20 rule, reveals that in most systems, roughly 80% of results come from 20% of causes. This model applies everywhere. 80% of your results come from 20% of your activities. 80% of problems come from 20% of causes. 80% of sales come from 20% of customers. Learning to identify and focus on the vital few rather than the trivial many transforms effectiveness. Inversion is a mental model that involves thinking backwards from desired outcomes. Instead of asking, "How do I succeed?" you ask, "How do I fail?" and then avoid those failure modes. Instead of asking, "How do I become happy?" you ask, "What makes people miserable?" and eliminate those factors. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner, credits inversion as one of his most valuable thinking tools. The Circle of Competence model helps you understand the boundaries of your knowledge and expertise. You have areas where your knowledge is deep and reliable, areas where it's shallow and unreliable, and vast areas where you know nothing at all. Operating within your circle of competence increases your chances of success, while venturing outside it requires extreme caution and additional safeguards. Probabilistic thinking replaces binary right-wrong judgments with probability estimates. Instead of thinking something will definitely happen or definitely won't, you estimate the likelihood. This model is crucial for decision-making under uncertainty, which describes almost all important decisions. When you think probabilistically, you make better bets and avoid the all-or-nothing thinking that destroys so many people. The incentives model recognizes that people respond to incentives, often in ways that contradict their stated intentions. To understand behavior, follow the incentives. What is this person rewarded for? What are they punished for? How do their incentives align with their stated goals? Misaligned incentives explain most organizational dysfunction and personal self-sabotage. Opportunity cost is the value of the best alternative you give up when making any choice. Every decision has an opportunity cost, but most people only consider the direct costs and benefits of their choices. Understanding opportunity cost helps you make better trade-offs and avoid the trap of thinking any option is free. The compound interest model applies far beyond finance. Small, consistent improvements compound over time into enormous differences. This applies to learning, relationships, health, and skill development. Understanding compound interest helps you think long-term and make investments that pay off dramatically over time. Anti-fragility, a concept developed by Nassim Taleb, describes systems that get stronger under stress rather than weaker. Some things are fragile. They break under pressure. Some things are robust. They withstand pressure. But anti-fragile things actually benefit from volatility and stress. Building anti-fragility into your life and decisions creates enormous advantages. The principal agent problem occurs when someone acts on behalf of another person but has different incentives. Your real estate agent wants to sell your house quickly, even if it means a lower price. Your financial advisor may recommend products that generate higher commissions rather than better returns. Understanding this model helps you structure relationships and contracts to align incentives properly. Network effects create situations where the value of something increases as more people use it. Social media platforms, languages, and technical standards all exhibit network effects. Understanding this model helps you identify technologies and platforms that will dominate their categories and avoid those that will fade away. The scientific method is itself a mental model for discovering truth. Form hypotheses, design tests, collect data, analyze results, and update your understanding based on evidence. This systematic approach to learning can be applied to personal decisions, business strategies, and life experiments. Building mental models requires deliberate study and practice. Read widely across disciplines: psychology, economics, physics, biology, history, and philosophy. All offer valuable models. Look for patterns that appear in multiple domains. The same principles that govern evolution also govern markets, organizations, and personal development. Test your models against reality regularly. Mental models are tools, not truths. A model that doesn't help you understand or predict real-world outcomes is worthless, regardless of how elegant it seems in theory. Be prepared to modify or abandon models when they fail to match observed results. Combine multiple models to get clearer pictures of complex situations. Charlie Munger calls this a latticework of mental models. No single model can capture the full complexity of any real situation, but multiple models applied together can give you remarkably clear insights. The quality of your mental models determines the quality of your thinking, and the quality of your thinking determines the quality of your life. Invest seriously in building your mental model toolkit. It's the highest leverage activity you can undertake for long-term success and fulfillment. Chapter 6. Mastering the language of logic. Logic is the foundation of critical thinking, but most people have never learned to think logically. They confuse persuasion with proof, correlation with causation, and emotional appeal with rational argument. Learning to recognize and construct valid logical arguments is like gaining X-ray vision for lies, manipulation, and faulty reasoning. Understanding logical structure begins with recognizing the difference between deductive and inductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning starts with general principles and reaches specific conclusions. If all humans are mortal, and Socrates is human, then Socrates is mortal. When the premises are true and the logic is valid, deductive conclusions are certain. Inductive reasoning works in the opposite direction, moving from specific observations to general conclusions. You observe that the sun has risen every day of your life, so you conclude that the sun will rise tomorrow. Inductive conclusions are probable rather than certain, but they're essential for navigating an uncertain world. The most dangerous logical fallacies are those that feel most convincing. Ad hominem attacks target the person making an argument rather than the argument itself. Instead of addressing your points, someone attacks your character, your appearance, or your past mistakes. This feels satisfying to audiences, but proves nothing about the validity of your position. Straw man arguments misrepresent opposing positions to make them easier to attack. Instead of engaging with the strongest version of an opponent's argument, the straw man technique creates a weaker, distorted version that's easier to demolish. Politicians use this constantly, characterizing nuanced policy positions as extreme caricatures. Appeal to authority relies on someone's status rather than their evidence or reasoning. Just because a famous person believes something doesn't make it true. Just because someone has a PhD doesn't mean they're right about everything. Authority can provide useful shortcuts for evaluating information, but it's never sufficient proof by itself. False dilemma presents only two options when more alternatives exist. You're either with us or against us. You either support this policy completely or you want chaos. This binary thinking eliminates nuance and forces people into artificial choices that don't reflect the complexity of real situations. Slippery slope arguments claim that one action will inevitably lead to extreme consequences. If we allow this small change, it will inevitably lead to complete disaster. While some slopes are genuinely slippery, most are not. Each step requires its own justification and its own decision. Circular reasoning uses conclusions as premises. We should trust the news because the news tells us we should trust it. This book is true because it says it's true. Circular arguments feel logical but prove nothing because they assume what they're trying to demonstrate. Appeal to emotion manipulates feelings rather than addressing facts. Heart-wrenching stories, frightening scenarios, and inspiring examples can all be used to bypass rational evaluation. Emotion has its place in human decision-making, but it should inform rather than replace logical analysis. Bandwagon fallacy assumes that popular opinions are correct. Everyone believes this, so it must be true. Millions of people can't be wrong. But history shows that popular beliefs are often completely mistaken. Truth is not determined by vote. Post hoc reasoning confuses correlation with causation. Event A happened before event B, so A must have caused B. This is one of the most common reasoning errors in human thinking. Just because two things happen in sequence doesn't mean one caused the other. Confirmation bias makes you notice evidence that supports your existing beliefs while ignoring contradictory evidence. You remember the times your intuition was right, but forget the times it was wrong. You notice news stories that confirm your political views, but dismiss those that challenge them. Survivorship bias focuses only on successful cases while ignoring failures. You see successful entrepreneurs and conclude that starting a business guarantees wealth, ignoring the vast majority of failed ventures. You hear about lottery winners, but not about the millions who lose money. Anchoring bias uses irrelevant information as a reference point for judgments. The first price you hear influences what you think is reasonable. The first impression you form affects all subsequent evaluations. Effective negotiators and salespeople exploit anchoring ruthlessly. Learning to spot these fallacies in real time requires practice and attention. Start by examining your own reasoning Before criticizing others, what assumptions are you making? What evidence would change your mind? Are you responding to the strongest version of opposing arguments or creating straw men? Develop the habit of asking for evidence and clarification. When someone makes a claim, ask how they know it's true. When they cite statistics, ask about methodology and sample sizes. When they appeal to authority, ask about relevant expertise and potential conflicts of interest. Practice steel manning rather than straw manning. Take the strongest, most charitable interpretation of positions you disagree with. Argue against the best version of opposing viewpoints, not the weakest. This builds intellectual honesty and forces you to confront the real challenges to your own beliefs. Learn to separate the quality of arguments from the conclusions they reach. A bad argument for a true conclusion is still a bad argument. A good argument for a false conclusion is still good logic applied to faulty premises. Evaluate reasoning independently from whether you like the results. Study formal logic and argumentation. Understanding syllogisms, validity, soundness, and logical structure gives you tools for constructing and evaluating arguments systematically. Philosophy and critical thinking courses provide excellent training in these skills. Practice constructing your own logical arguments. Start with your conclusions and work backwards to identify the premises and reasoning that support them. Make your assumptions explicit. Identify potential weaknesses and objections. Test your logic by trying to find counterexamples. Remember that logic is a tool, not a religion. Perfect logical reasoning applied to false premises leads to false conclusions. Limited logical reasoning applied to true premises can still yield valuable insights. The goal is not logical perfection, but better thinking that leads to better decisions and better outcomes. Most importantly, recognize that mastering logic is not about winning arguments, but about finding truth. When someone points out flaws in your reasoning, thank them rather than defending your errors. When you discover mistakes in your own thinking, celebrate the opportunity to improve rather than feeling embarrassed about being wrong. Chapter 7. The Decision-Making Revolution. Every moment of your life is shaped by decisions. From the moment you wake up until you fall asleep, you're constantly choosing what to think, feel, say, and do. Yet most people make decisions poorly, relying on gut instinct, social pressure, or whatever feels good in the moment. Learning to make decisions systematically and strategically is perhaps the highest leverage skill you can develop. Traditional decision-making advice focuses on gathering more information, making pro and con lists, or following your passion. But modern decision science reveals that these approaches often make decisions worse, not better. More information can lead to analysis paralysis. Pro and con lists give equal weight to factors that should be weighted differently. Following your passion ignores practical constraints and long-term consequences. The first principle of advanced decision-making is recognizing that you're not choosing between good and bad options. You're choosing between different sets of trade-offs. Every choice involves giving up some things to get others. The question is not which option is perfect, but which set of trade-offs aligns best with your values and goals. Expected value thinking provides a mathematical framework for comparing options under uncertainty. Multiply the probability of each outcome by its value, then sum across all possible outcomes. This sounds complicated, but it's actually quite intuitive once you practice. Would you rather have a guaranteed $1,000 or a 50% chance of winning $3,000? Expected value analysis gives you a systematic way to compare such choices. But expected value alone is insufficient because it ignores risk tolerance and utility curves. $1,000 means more to someone living paycheck to paycheck than to a millionaire. Losing your house is more significant than losing the same amount of money from your investment portfolio. You need to consider not just mathematical expected value, but personal utility and risk capacity. Prospective hindsight, also called pre-mortem analysis, involves imagining that your decision has failed and working backwards to understand why. Before implementing a strategy, imagine it's 1 year later and the strategy has completely failed. What went wrong? What warning signs did you miss? What assumptions proved incorrect? This exercise helps you identify potential problems before they occur. The inside view versus outside view distinction, developed by Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman, reveals why people consistently underestimate time, costs, and difficulty while overestimating benefits and success probability. The inside view focuses on the specific details of your situation and why you're different. The outside view looks at base rates and reference class forecasting. If you're starting a business, the inside view focuses on your unique idea, your special advantages, and your superior execution ability. The outside view asks what percentage of similar businesses succeed and what typically causes failure. Both perspectives are valuable, but most people rely too heavily on the inside view and ignore base rate information. Reversible versus irreversible decisions require different approaches. Amazon's Jeff Bezos categorizes decisions as one-way doors or two-way doors. One-way doors are difficult or impossible to reverse and require careful analysis. Two-way doors can be changed easily and should be made quickly with less deliberation. Most decisions are two-way doors, but people treat them like one-way doors and over-analyze. Satisficing versus optimizing represents another crucial distinction. Optimizing means finding the absolute best option among all possibilities. Satisficing means finding an option that meets your criteria and is good enough. For most decisions, satisficing is superior because the time and energy spent optimizing could be better used elsewhere. The paradox of choice research by Barry Schwartz demonstrates that more options often lead to worse decisions and lower satisfaction. When faced with too many alternatives, people experience analysis paralysis, make poorer choices, and feel less satisfied with whatever they choose. Learning to artificially constrain your options can improve both decision speed and quality. Sunk cost fallacy keeps people trapped in bad decisions because they can't bear to waste previous investments. The money, time, and energy you've already spent are gone regardless of what you decide going forward. Future decisions should be based on future costs and benefits, not past investments. This is emotionally difficult but logically essential. Opportunity cost analysis considers what you give up by choosing each option. Every choice forecloses other possibilities. The true cost of going to college is not just tuition and expenses, but also the income and experience you could have gained by working instead. The true cost of staying in a relationship is not just the relationship's problems, but also the other relationships you're not pursuing. Decision trees provide visual tools for mapping complex decisions with multiple stages and uncertain outcomes. Start with your initial decision. Map out possible outcomes and their probabilities. Then map subsequent decisions and outcomes. This reveals the full structure of complex choices and helps you see paths that weren't obvious initially. Time horizons dramatically affect optimal decisions. What's best for the next week might be terrible for the next decade. What's optimal for your career might be suboptimal for your family. Explicitly considering different time frames helps you make decisions that balance short-term and long-term considerations. Personal values clarification is essential for good decision-making. If you don't know what you really care about, you can't evaluate trade-offs effectively. Most people have never explicitly identified their core values or prioritized them when they conflict. Values clarification exercises help you understand what really matters to you versus what you think should matter. Energy management affects decision quality throughout the day. Your cognitive resources are limited and depleted by use. Important decisions should be made when your mental energy is highest, typically earlier in the day. Routine decisions should be automated or delegated to preserve mental resources for what matters most. Decision journaling involves recording important decisions, your reasoning, your predictions, and eventual outcomes. This creates a feedback loop that helps you learn from experience and identify patterns in your decision-making. Most people never track their decisions systematically, so they repeat mistakes and don't improve over time. Seeking out disconfirming evidence involves actively looking for information that contradicts your preferred choice. Natural confirmation bias makes you notice evidence supporting your inclinations while ignoring contradictory data. Deliberately seeking out opposing viewpoints and contrary evidence leads to more robust decisions. The goal of decision-making mastery is not perfect choices but better processes that lead to better outcomes over time. You will make mistakes and bad decisions regardless of how good your process becomes. But systematic decision-making will help you make fewer mistakes, recover from them faster, and compound good decisions into extraordinary results. Chapter 8. Information Warfare. Navigating Truth in a World of Lies. We live in an information war zone. Every day, you're bombarded with thousands of messages designed to influence your thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Some of this information is accurate and helpful. Much of it is biased, incomplete, or deliberately deceptive. Your ability to distinguish truth from manipulation determines your capacity to make good decisions and live an authentic life. The democratization of information through the internet was supposed to make everyone smarter and more informed. Instead, it created an environment where anyone can publish anything to a global audience without editorial oversight or fact-checking. The result is information chaos where truth and lies compete on equal footing for your attention. Understanding information sources is the first line of defense against manipulation. Primary sources provide direct evidence or first-hand accounts. Secondary sources interpret, analyze, or summarize primary sources. Tertiary sources compile information from secondary sources. The further you get from primary sources, the more opportunities for distortion, bias, and error. Media literacy requires understanding the business models that drive information production. Traditional newspapers relied on subscription and advertising revenue. Creating incentives for accuracy and credibility to maintain audience trust. Modern digital media often relies on clicks, views, and engagement, creating incentives for sensationalism, outrage, and confirmation bias. Social media algorithms amplify content that generates strong emotional responses because emotion drives engagement and engagement drives revenue. This means that measured, nuanced, accurate information is systematically discriminated against in favor of extreme, polarizing, and often misleading content. Motivated reasoning affects information evaluation at every level. People don't just accidentally misinterpret information, they actively seek out and create interpretations that support their existing beliefs and desired conclusions. This happens unconsciously and feels like objective analysis even when it's heavily biased. The availability heuristic makes you overestimate the frequency and importance of events that are easily remembered. Dramatic, recent, and emotional events seem more common than they actually are because they're more mentally available. This is why people overestimate the risks of terrorism and plane crashes while underestimating the risks of heart disease and car accidents. Confirmation bias in information consumption means you notice, remember, and share information that confirms your existing beliefs while ignoring or dismissing contradictory evidence. Social media echo chambers amplify this effect by showing you content similar to what you've previously engaged with. False balance occurs when media outlets give equal weight to unequal positions in the name of fairness. Not every issue has two equally valid sides. Sometimes the scientific consensus is overwhelming, and presenting fringe views as equally legitimate misleads audiences about the actual state of knowledge. Astroturfing creates the appearance of grassroots movements that are actually funded and organized by corporations or political groups. What looks like spontaneous public opinion might be manufactured by professional influence campaigns using fake social media accounts, paid commenters, and coordinated messaging. Statistical manipulation can make almost any conclusion seem supported by data. Sample sizes might be too small for reliable conclusions. Surveys might use leading questions that bias responses. Correlations might be presented as causations. Cherry-picked time periods might create misleading trends. Visual manipulation uses charts, graphs, and images to create false impressions. Y-axis scaling can make small differences look dramatic, or large differences look insignificant. Pie charts can distort proportions. Stock photos can create emotional associations that have nothing to do with the actual story. Deepfakes and sophisticated photo manipulation make it increasingly difficult to trust visual evidence. Technology that once required professional equipment and expertise is now available to anyone with a smartphone and basic software skills. The assumption that seeing is believing no longer holds. Expert shopping involves finding credentialed individuals who support predetermined conclusions, rather than seeking the best available expertise. For any position, you can probably find someone with impressive credentials who agrees with it. The question is not whether you can find expert support, but whether the expert consensus supports your position. Developing information evaluation skills requires systematic approaches to source verification. Check the author's credentials and potential conflicts of interest. Look for citations and follow them to primary sources. Compare coverage across multiple outlets with different editorial perspectives. Check fact-checking sites and scientific databases. Lateral reading used by professional fact-checkers, involves opening multiple browser tabs to research unfamiliar sources, claims, and evidence while reading. Instead of reading straight through an article and then evaluating it, you pause frequently to verify claims and investigate sources in real time. The SIFT method provides a practical framework for information evaluation. Stop and think before sharing or acting on information. Investigate the source to understand their credibility and potential biases. Find better coverage by checking multiple sources and expert opinions. Trace claims to their origins to see if they're accurately represented. Understanding cognitive load helps explain why misinformation spreads. Evaluating information quality requires mental effort, and people often lack the time, energy, or motivation for thorough fact-checking. Simple, emotionally compelling false information often spreads faster than complex, nuanced truth. Building information resilience requires developing emotional regulation skills. Outrage, fear, and excitement make you more likely to share information without verification. Learning to pause and reflect before reacting helps you avoid spreading misinformation and making decisions based on false or incomplete information. Creating diverse information diets exposes you to different perspectives and reduces the risk of living in echo chambers. Deliberately seek out sources that challenge your assumptions and present alternative viewpoints. This doesn't mean accepting everything you read, but understanding the full range of perspectives on important issues. The goal is not to become paranoid about all information, but to develop discernment about information quality and reliability. Some sources are consistently accurate and trustworthy. Some are consistently biased, but still useful if you understand their perspective. Some are completely unreliable and should be ignored entirely. Information
This
warfare
skill is not just
real,
nice to have,
and your mind is
it's
the
essential
battlefield
for
making good decisions.
The winners are
in an
those who can-
environment where your information sources directly determine your life outcomes. Chapter 9. Emotional intelligence for critical thinkers. Most people believe that emotion and reason are opposites, that good thinking requires suppressing feelings and relying purely on logic. This is not only wrong, it's counterproductive. Emotions provide crucial information about yourself, other people, and situations. The goal is not to eliminate emotion, but to understand how emotion influences thinking, and to use both emotional and rational intelligence together. Neuroscience research reveals that emotion and cognition are inextricably linked. People with damage to emotional brain centers retain their logical reasoning abilities, but become terrible decision-makers. Without emotional input, they can spend hours debating trivial choices like which pen to use. Emotion doesn't interfere with good thinking. It's essential for it. Understanding your emotional responses begins with developing emotional awareness. Most people experience emotions but don't examine them. They feel angry, sad, or excited without asking why they feel that way or what their feelings are telling them. Emotional awareness means noticing your feelings as they arise and exploring what triggered them. Emotions are information, not instructions. Anger tells you that something important to you is being threatened or violated. Fear warns you about potential dangers. Excitement indicates opportunities you value. But emotions don't tell you what to do about these situations. They provide data that should inform but not control your responses. Emotional regulation is different from emotional suppression. Suppression involves pushing feelings down and pretending they don't exist. This doesn't work and often makes emotions stronger and more disruptive. Regulation involves acknowledging emotions, understanding their messages, and choosing how to respond to them. The ABC model from cognitive behavioral therapy provides a framework for understanding how thoughts, emotions, and behaviors interact. A stands for activating events, things that happen to you. B stands for beliefs, how you interpret those events. C stands for consequences, the emotions and behaviors that result from your interpretations. Most people think that events directly cause emotions. Something bad happens, and you feel upset. But it's actually your interpretation of events that determines your emotional response. Two people can experience the same situation and have completely different emotional reactions based on how they interpret what happened. This insight is incredibly empowering because while you can't always control what happens to you, you can learn to control how you interpret and respond to events. Cognitive restructuring involves examining your automatic thoughts and interpretations to see if they're accurate, helpful, and rational. Common cognitive distortions create unnecessary emotional suffering and impair clear thinking. All or nothing thinking sees situations in black and white terms without recognizing middle ground. Catastrophizing imagines the worst possible outcomes and treats them as likely. Mind reading assumes you know what other people are thinking without checking. Fortune-telling predicts negative futures without evidence. Emotional contagion means that you automatically absorb the emotions of people around you. Spending time with angry people makes you angrier. Surrounding yourself with anxious people increases your anxiety. This happens below the level of consciousness, through mirror neurons and autonomic nervous system synchronization. Understanding emotional contagion helps you make better choices about your social environment. The emotions of people you spend time with literally become your emotions. This is why successful people are careful about their associations and why negative social environments are so toxic to mental health and clear thinking. Empathy and sympathy are often confused but involve different processes. Sympathy involves feeling sorry for someone suffering. Empathy involves understanding and sharing their emotional experience. Both can be valuable, but empathy requires careful boundaries to avoid emotional overwhelm and loss of objectivity. Perspective-taking helps you understand other people's emotions and motivations without losing your own center. This involves imagining how situations look from other people's viewpoints, while remembering that your imaginations might be wrong. Good perspective-taking combines empathy with intellectual humility. Emotional manipulation occurs when people deliberately trigger your emotions to influence your behavior. Fear-based appeals make you feel afraid, so you'll accept protection or solutions. Guilt trips make you feel responsible for other people's emotions, so you'll comply with their demands. Flattery makes you feel special, so you'll be more agreeable to requests. Recognizing emotional manipulation requires understanding your own emotional triggers and noticing when people seem to be deliberately pushing them. Manipulators often create artificial urgency, use extreme language, and try to prevent you from thinking clearly or seeking outside perspectives. Building emotional resilience involves developing the capacity to experience difficult emotions without being overwhelmed by them. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally numb, but learning to stay functional and clear thinking even when dealing with pain, fear, anger, or sadness. Mindfulness practices help you observe your emotions without being controlled by them. Instead of being caught up in anger, you notice that you're experiencing anger instead of drowning in sadness. You observe sadness as a temporary mental state. This creates space between you and your emotions that allows for choice in how you respond. Emotional granularity refers to your ability to distinguish between different emotional states. Most people have limited emotional vocabularies and lump many different feelings into broad categories like good or bad, happy or sad. Developing emotional granularity helps you understand yourself better and respond more appropriately to different situations. Values clarification helps you understand what triggers your strongest emotional responses. You feel angry when your values are violated and excited when they're supported. Understanding your core values helps you predict your emotional reactions and make decisions that align with what you really care about. The goal of emotional intelligence for critical thinkers is not to become emotionally detached, but to become emotionally wise. You want to access the valuable information emotions provide while maintaining the capacity for clear, rational analysis. You want to understand other people's emotions without being manipulated by them. You want to make decisions that honor both your feelings and your logic. Emotional intelligence and critical thinking are not opposing forces, but complementary capacities that work together to help you navigate complexity, build relationships, and make decisions that lead to genuine success and fulfillment. Masters of critical thinking are not emotionless robots, but people who understand how emotion and reason can work together to create extraordinary outcomes. Chapter 10. The Systems Approach to Clear Thinking. Most people approach thinking as a series of isolated moments, individual decisions, separate problems, disconnected analyses. But critical thinking mastery requires understanding that your thinking occurs within systems that either support or undermine your cognitive performance. Building systems that consistently promote clear thinking is more important than relying on willpower or motivation to think better. Your physical environment directly affects your cognitive capacity. Clutter creates mental distraction. Poor lighting strains your brain. Noise interrupts concentration. Temperature extremes consume mental resources. Creating physical spaces optimized for thinking is not superficial. It's fundamental to cognitive performance. Information systems determine the quality of inputs your mind receives. Most people consume information randomly and passively, letting algorithms, social media feeds, and news cycles determine what they think about. Building deliberate information systems involves choosing what you read, watch, and listen to based on your goals rather than your impulses. Social systems shape your thinking through the people you interact with regularly. Your friends, colleagues, family members, and online communities all influence your thoughts, beliefs, and reasoning patterns. Surrounding yourself with people who think clearly and challenge you intellectually improves your own thinking more than any individual effort. Temporal systems involve structuring your time to optimize cognitive performance. Your brain has natural rhythms of alertness and fatigue throughout the day. Scheduling important thinking tasks during your peak performance windows and routine tasks during low-energy periods maximizes your mental effectiveness. Decision-making systems reduce the cognitive load of routine choices so you can focus mental energy on what matters most. Barack Obama wore the same suit every day to eliminate clothing decisions. Steve Jobs had a uniform for the same reason. Decision fatigue is real, and systems that automate or simplify recurring choices preserve mental resources for important thinking. Learning systems ensure that you continuously improve your thinking skills over time. Most people don't learn from their thinking mistakes because they don't have systems for tracking, analyzing, and improving their cognitive performance. Deliberate practice applied to thinking skills creates compound improvements over years and decades. The review system involves regularly examining your beliefs, decisions, and reasoning patterns to identify errors and improvement opportunities. This might include weekly reviews of important decisions, monthly examinations of your changing beliefs, or annual assessments of your thinking systems themselves. Feedback systems help you understand the quality of your thinking by tracking outcomes over time. Decision journals record your reasoning and predictions so you can see which types of thinking lead to good results and which lead to poor outcomes. Without systematic feedback, you can't distinguish between good thinking that led to bad luck and bad thinking that led to good luck. Error correction systems help you identify and fix thinking mistakes quickly. This includes seeking out people who disagree with you, actively looking for disconfirming evidence, and creating processes that catch errors before they compound into major problems. Most people's natural instincts make errors worse rather than better. Energy management systems recognize that thinking quality depends on your physical and mental state. Sleep, nutrition, exercise, stress levels, and emotional state all affect cognitive performance. Optimizing these factors is not separate from improving thinking. It's essential to it. The recovery system ensures that you can restore cognitive capacity after periods of intense mental work. Just as physical muscles need rest to grow stronger, your mental muscles need recovery to maintain peak performance. This includes both daily rest periods and longer recovery cycles. Technology systems leverage tools and platforms that enhance rather than impair your thinking. This might include note-taking apps that help you organize thoughts, calendar systems that optimize your schedule, or information filters that reduce cognitive overload. The key is choosing technology that serves your thinking goals rather than distracting from them. Accountability systems create external pressure to maintain good thinking habits. This might involve thinking partners who challenge your reasoning, mentors who provide guidance, or tracking systems that make your cognitive performance visible to others. Most people need external accountability to maintain high standards consistently. The calibration system helps you understand the accuracy of your confidence levels. You should feel very confident about things you're almost certainly right about, and less confident about things you're uncertain about. Most people are poorly calibrated, feeling either overconfident about everything or underconfident about everything. Research systems help you gather high-quality information efficiently when making important decisions. This includes knowing where to find reliable sources, how to evaluate conflicting information, and when to stop researching and start deciding. Good research systems prevent both underinformed and over-researched decisions. Communication systems help you think more clearly by forcing you to articulate your thoughts precisely. Writing, teaching, and explaining your reasoning to others reveals gaps and errors that remain hidden when thoughts stay in your head. Clear communication and clear thinking are inseparable. The experimentation system treats your beliefs and strategies as hypotheses to be tested rather than truths to be defended. This involves designing small experiments to test your assumptions, measuring results objectively, and updating your beliefs based on evidence rather than wishful thinking. Stress management systems recognize that stress impairs thinking quality and creates predictable cognitive biases. Effective stress management isn't just good for your health, it's essential for maintaining clear thinking during challenging situations when good thinking matters most. The key insight is that relying on motivation and willpower to think clearly is like relying on motivation and willpower to stay in shape. It works occasionally, but fails consistently. Systems create structure that makes good thinking more likely and bad thinking less likely, regardless of how you feel in any particular moment. Building thinking systems requires initial effort and ongoing maintenance, but the compound returns are extraordinary. People with good thinking systems consistently outperform more naturally intelligent people who rely on intuition and impulse. Systems thinking applied to thinking itself creates sustainable competitive advantages that last for decades. Your thinking systems determine your life trajectory more than your natural intelligence, your education, or your circumstances. Invest seriously in building systems that support clear thinking, and everything else becomes easier. Neglect your thinking systems, and everything else becomes harder, regardless of your other advantages. Chapter 11: Strategic Communication and Persuasion Mastery. Understanding how to communicate your ideas effectively and how others attempt to persuade you is essential for critical thinking mastery. Communication is not just about expressing yourself clearly. It's about navigating the complex social dynamics that shape how information is received, processed, and acted upon. Masters of critical thinking are also masters of strategic communication. The foundation of persuasive communication is understanding your audience's mental models, values, and cognitive biases. Most people communicate from their own perspective, using their own language and addressing their own concerns. But effective communication requires stepping into your audience's shoes and crafting messages that resonate with their worldview. Cognitive ease affects how people receive and evaluate information. Ideas that are easy to understand, remember, and visualize feel more true and important than complex, abstract concepts. This is why simple slogans often defeat nuanced arguments in public discourse. Understanding cognitive ease helps you present complex ideas in accessible ways without oversimplifying them. The elaboration likelihood model explains how people process persuasive messages through two different routes. The central route involves careful analysis of arguments and evidence. The peripheral route relies on mental shortcuts like source credibility, emotional appeal, and social proof. Both routes are valid, and effective communicators understand when and how to use each approach. Framing effects demonstrate that how you present information is often more important than the information itself. The same statistics can support opposite conclusions depending on how they're framed. Losses feel more significant than equivalent gains. Risks seem more acceptable when presented as frequencies rather than percentages. Mastering framing helps you communicate more effectively and recognize when others are manipulating your perceptions. Social proof leverages people's tendency to look to others for guidance about appropriate behavior and beliefs. People are more likely to accept ideas that seem popular, normal, or endorsed by their peers. This is why testimonials, case studies, and bandwagon appeals are so powerful. Understanding social proof helps you communicate persuasively and resist manipulation. Authority effects make people more likely to accept information from credible sources. But authority is domain-specific and context-dependent. A person might be an expert in one area and completely ignorant in another. Effective communicators establish relevant credibility, while critical thinkers evaluate authority claims carefully. Reciprocity creates psychological pressure to return favors and concessions. When someone does something for you, you feel obligated to do something for them in return. This principle can be used ethically to build relationships and gain cooperation, or manipulatively to exploit people's sense of obligation. Commitment and consistency leverage people's desire to appear and feel consistent with their previous statements and behaviors. Once someone takes a position publicly, they feel pressure to maintain that position even when presented with contradictory evidence. Understanding this principle helps you encourage follow-through while avoiding the trap of defending positions that are no longer defensible. Liking effects make people more persuaded by individuals they find attractive, similar, or familiar. This includes physical attractiveness, but also similarity in beliefs, background, or interests. People are more likely to be influenced by those they perceive as being like them or those they want to be like. Scarcity creates urgency and increases perceived value. Limited time offers, exclusive opportunities, and rare resources all seem more desirable because of their scarcity. This principle can motivate action, but can also be used manipulatively to pressure people into poor decisions. The contrast principle affects how people evaluate options by comparing them to whatever they encountered immediately before. Real estate agents show overpriced houses first to make other properties seem more reasonable. Negotiators make extreme initial demands to make their real requests seem moderate. Understanding contrast helps you make better comparisons and avoid manipulation. Storytelling engages emotions and makes abstract concepts concrete and memorable. Stories provide context, create emotional connection, and help people visualize how ideas apply to real situations. Data tells, but stories sell. Effective communicators use stories to make their points more compelling and memorable. Analogies and metaphors help people understand new concepts by relating them to familiar experiences. But analogies can also mislead by highlighting some similarities while obscuring important differences. Good analogies illuminate, while bad analogies confuse. Learning to construct and evaluate analogies improves both communication and thinking. Active listening involves truly understanding other people's perspectives before attempting to influence them. Most people listen just enough to formulate their response rather than genuinely trying to understand. Active listening builds rapport, reveals important information, and helps you tailor your communication to be more effective. The yes ladder technique involves getting people to agree with small, obvious points before presenting larger, more controversial ideas. Each agreement creates momentum toward accepting the next point. This can be used ethically to build understanding or manipulatively to lead people toward predetermined conclusions. Addressing objections proactively rather than defensively makes your argument stronger and builds credibility. Acknowledging legitimate concerns and providing thoughtful responses demonstrates intellectual honesty and prevents opponents from blindsiding you with obvious counterarguments. The inoculation effect involves exposing people to weak versions of opposing arguments along with refutations, making them more resistant to stronger versions later. This is like giving someone a vaccine. Exposure to a weakened form of the disease builds immunity to the full-strength version. Timing affects receptivity to persuasive messages. People are more persuadable when they're in good moods, after they've eaten, or when they're slightly distracted. Understanding timing helps you choose when to present important ideas, and when to delay difficult conversations. Non-verbal communication often carries more weight than verbal content. Body language, tone of voice, facial expressions, and spatial positioning all influence how messages are received. Incongruence between verbal and nonverbal messages creates confusion and reduces credibility. The primacy and recency effects show that people remember information presented first and last better than information presented in the middle. This affects how you structure presentations, arguments, and negotiations. Lead with your strongest point and end with your second strongest. Putting weaker material in the middle. Building coalitions multiplies your influence by aligning your interests with others who share similar goals. Individual voices can be ignored, but groups demand attention. Understanding how to find allies, build consensus, and coordinate collective action amplifies your impact. Strategic ambiguity involves deliberately leaving some aspects of your communication unclear to allow different audiences to interpret your message in ways that appeal to them. This can be useful in coalition building, but dangerous when clarity is essential for implementation. The goal of strategic communication mastery is not to manipulate people, but to express ideas clearly, build genuine understanding, and create win-win outcomes. When you understand how persuasion works, you become both more effective at influencing others and more resistant to inappropriate influence attempts. Critical thinkers who master strategic communication can share their insights effectively, build support for important causes, and resist manipulation attempts. They understand that in a world full of competing ideas and interests, the best ideas don't automatically win. They must be communicated strategically to have their intended impact. Chapter 12. Advanced Problem Solving and Creative Thinking. Most people approach problems with the same tired strategies they've always used, wondering why they keep getting the same unsatisfactory results. But critical thinking mastery includes the ability to generate novel solutions, see problems from multiple angles, and break through the mental barriers that keep most people trapped in conventional thinking patterns. The first step in advanced problem solving is properly defining the problem you're trying to solve. Most people jump immediately to solutions without fully understanding what they're dealing with. They treat symptoms as root causes, mistake urgent issues for important ones, and solve the wrong problems efficiently rather than solving the right problems effectively. Root cause analysis involves digging beneath surface symptoms to identify underlying systemic issues. The 5 whys technique repeatedly asks why something happened until you reach fundamental causes. Why did the project fail? Because we missed the deadline. Why did we miss the deadline? Because we underestimated the complexity. Why did we underestimate the complexity? Continue until you reach actionable root causes. Problem framing dramatically affects which solutions become visible. The same situation can be framed as a technical problem, a communication problem, a resource problem, or a strategic problem, with each framing suggesting different solution approaches. Effective problem solvers try multiple framings before settling on solution strategies. Constraint identification reveals both obstacles and opportunities. Physical constraints limit what's possible. Resource constraints affect what's practical. Time constraints influence what's urgent. But constraints also focus creativity by eliminating infinite possibilities and forcing innovative approaches within defined boundaries. The constraint removal technique involves imagining what you would do if various limitations didn't exist. What if money were no object? What if time weren't a factor? What if you had unlimited resources? These thought experiments often reveal solutions that seemed impossible under current constraints, but are actually achievable with creative approaches. Analogical reasoning applies solutions from one domain to problems in another domain. How do other industries handle similar challenges? What can you learn from biology, physics, or history? Velcro was inspired by burr seeds. The airplane wing design came from studying birds. Cross-domain analogies often produce breakthrough innovations. Systematic inventive thinking uses specific techniques to generate novel solutions. Subtraction involves removing components to see what happens. Multiplication repeats successful elements. Division breaks unified systems into separate parts. Task unification combines multiple functions into single elements. These techniques force you beyond obvious solutions. Lateral thinking, developed by Edward de Bono, deliberately seeks indirect approaches to problems. Instead of working harder on obvious solutions, lateral thinking explores tangential possibilities. Random word association, provocation techniques, and concept extraction can lead to unexpected breakthroughs. The Scamper method provides a systematic approach to creative problem solving. Substitute different components or approaches. Combine unrelated elements. Adapt solutions from other contexts. Modify existing solutions. Put elements to other uses. Eliminate unnecessary components. Reverse or rearrange the sequence of events. Brainstorming effectiveness depends on following specific rules that most people ignore. Generate ideas without immediate evaluation. Build on others' ideas rather than competing with them. Encourage wild and unusual suggestions. Focus on quantity over quality initially. Evaluation comes later, after the creative phase is complete. Mind mapping visually represents problem elements and their relationships. Start with the central problem and branch out to related issues, potential causes, possible solutions, and implementation considerations. Visual representation often reveals connections that remain hidden in linear thinking. The Six Thinking Hats method, also by Edward de Bono, systematically explores problems from different perspectives. White hat thinking focuses on facts and information. Red hat explores emotions and intuition. Black hat considers risks and problems. Yellow hat examines benefits and optimism. Green hat generates creative alternatives. Blue hat manages the thinking process itself. Assumption challenging questions. The fundamental beliefs underlying your approach to problems. What assumptions are you making about the situation? Which assumptions might be wrong? How would your approach change if key assumptions were false? Many breakthrough solutions come from questioning assumptions that everyone else takes for granted. The opposite thinking technique explores solutions that seem completely backwards from conventional approaches. Instead of trying to reduce customer complaints, what if you tried to increase them in specific ways that revealed improvement opportunities? Instead of speeding up processes, what if you deliberately slowed them down to improve quality? Pattern breaking involves deliberately disrupting habitual thinking patterns that keep you trapped in conventional solutions. Change your environment. Work at different times. Collaborate with unusual partners. Use different tools. Physical changes often trigger mental changes that enable creative breakthroughs. The morphological method systematically combines different solution components to generate novel approaches. List the key dimensions of your problem. Identify different options for each dimension. Systematically combine different options to create new solution possibilities. This ensures you consider combinations that wouldn't occur naturally. Biomimicry studies natural systems to inspire human solutions. How do animals, plants, and natural processes solve similar problems? Shark skin inspired more efficient swimsuits. Gecko feet led to new adhesive technologies. Bird flocking behavior informed swarm robotics. Nature has often already solved the problems you're facing. The ideal solution method imagines perfect outcomes without regard to current limitations, then works backwards to identify what would need to be true to achieve those outcomes. What would the ideal solution look like? What barriers prevent that ideal? How might those barriers be removed or circumvented? Incubation involves deliberately stepping away from problems to allow unconscious processing. Many breakthrough insights occur during relaxation, exercise, or other activities unrelated to the problem. Building incubation periods into your problem-solving process often produces better solutions than continuous focused effort. Prototyping and experimentation test solution concepts quickly and cheaply before full implementation. Build rough models, run small tests, and gather feedback early. Rapid iteration based on real-world feedback produces better solutions than extensive planning based on assumptions. Solution evaluation criteria help you choose between multiple creative options. Feasibility considers whether solutions can actually be implemented. Impact assesses whether solutions will meaningfully address the problem. Cost examines resource requirements. Risk evaluates potential negative consequences. Systematic evaluation prevents you from falling in love with creative solutions that don't actually work. The key insight is that creativity and logical thinking are not opposites, but complementary processes that work together to solve complex problems. Creative thinking generates possibilities. Critical thinking evaluates and refines them. The combination produces solutions that are both novel and practical. Advanced problem-solving and creative thinking are learnable skills that improve with practice. The more techniques you master and the more problems you solve creatively, the more natural creative thinking becomes. Eventually, generating novel solutions becomes automatic rather than effortful. Chapter 13. Building unbreakable mental resilience. Mental resilience is the ability to maintain clear thinking and effective performance under pressure, adversity, and uncertainty. It's what separates people who thrive during challenges from those who crumble when things get difficult. Building unbreakable mental resilience is not about becoming emotionally numb or artificially positive. It's about developing authentic strength that allows you to navigate difficulties with wisdom and grace. Understanding resilience begins with recognizing that it's not a personality trait you either have or don't have. Resilience is a set of learnable skills and mental strategies that can be developed systematically. Some people seem naturally resilient because they learned these skills early, but anyone can build resilience at any age through deliberate practice. The foundation of mental resilience is accurate perception of reality. Many people become less resilient by either catastrophizing difficulties or minimizing their impact. Resilient people see situations clearly, acknowledging real problems without exaggerating them, and recognizing genuine opportunities without being unrealistically optimistic. Cognitive flexibility allows you to adapt your thinking when circumstances change. Rigid thinking patterns that worked in the past might be completely inappropriate for current situations. Mental resilience requires the ability to question your assumptions, update your beliefs based on new evidence, and change strategies when original approaches aren't working. The growth mindset, researched extensively by Carol Dweck, treats challenges, failures, and setbacks as opportunities for learning and development rather than threats to your self-image. People with growth mindsets recover from difficulties faster because they interpret setbacks as information rather than indictments of their worth or ability. Locus of control distinguishes between factors you can influence and factors beyond your control. Resilient people focus their energy on what they can change while accepting what they cannot change. This prevents the frustration and helplessness that come from trying to control uncontrollable situations. Response flexibility gives you multiple options for dealing with difficult situations. Instead of having only one strategy for handling stress, criticism, or failure, resilient people develop diverse response repertoires. When one approach doesn't work, they can quickly shift to alternatives rather than persisting with ineffective strategies. Emotional regulation allows you to experience difficult emotions without being overwhelmed or controlled by them. This doesn't mean suppressing emotions, but learning to observe them, understand their messages, and choose how to respond rather than reacting automatically to whatever you feel. Meaning-making helps you find purpose and significance in difficult experiences. Viktor Frankl observed that concentration camp survivors who found meaning in their suffering were more likely to survive than those who saw only senseless brutality. Resilient people can extract lessons, growth opportunities, and deeper understanding from their most challenging experiences. Social support systems provide practical assistance, emotional comfort, and different perspectives during difficult times. Resilient people cultivate relationships before they need them and aren't afraid to ask for help when problems exceed their individual capacity to handle them. Stress inoculation involves deliberately exposing yourself to manageable levels of stress to build tolerance for larger challenges. Just as physical exercise stresses your muscles to make them stronger, controlled psychological stress builds mental strength. The key is ensuring the stress is manageable and that you have recovery periods. Self-compassion replaces harsh self-criticism with the kind of understanding and support you would offer a good friend facing similar difficulties. Self-criticism undermines resilience by creating additional suffering on top of whatever external challenges you're facing. Self-compassion provides the emotional support necessary for learning and growth. Optimism based on agency rather than fantasy maintains hope while remaining grounded in reality. Realistic optimism believes that you can influence outcomes through your efforts while acknowledging that success isn't guaranteed. This differs from naive optimism that ignores real obstacles or pessimism that assumes efforts are pointless. Physical foundation affects mental resilience dramatically. Sleep, nutrition, exercise, and stress management aren't separate from mental strength. They're essential components of it. Your brain is a physical organ that depends on your body's condition. Maintaining physical health is maintaining the biological foundation of mental resilience. Preparation and planning reduce the impact of predictable challenges. While you can't anticipate every possible difficulty, you can prepare for common problems and develop general strategies for handling unexpected situations. Emergency funds provide financial resilience. Skill development provides professional resilience. Strong relationships provide social resilience. Recovery practices ensure that you can restore your mental resources after periods of intense stress or effort. Just as athletes need rest days to maintain peak performance, your mind needs recovery periods to maintain resilience. This includes both daily restoration practices and longer recovery cycles. Learning from failure requires systematic approaches to extracting value from setbacks. What worked well? What could be improved? What assumptions proved incorrect? What would you do differently? Without deliberate reflection, failures become pure losses instead of learning opportunities. The narrative you tell yourself about difficult experiences affects your resilience dramatically. The same event can be framed as evidence of your incompetence or proof of your courage to attempt difficult things. Resilient people craft empowering narratives that highlight their agency, growth, and capacity for future success. Acceptance versus resignation represents a crucial distinction. Acceptance acknowledges reality without necessarily liking it, creating space for appropriate responses. Resignation gives up agency and assumes nothing can be done. Acceptance actually increases your power by preventing wasted energy on resistance while focusing attention on productive responses. Post-traumatic growth describes the positive psychological changes that can result from struggling with adversity. These include deeper relationships, increased appreciation for life, greater personal strength, enhanced spiritual development, and new possibilities for the future. Not everyone experiences post-traumatic growth, but it's more likely when you actively seek meaning and learning in difficult experiences. Anti-fragility goes beyond resilience to describe systems that actually get stronger under stress. While resilient systems return to their previous state after disruption, anti-fragile systems emerge stronger than before. Building anti-fragility involves seeking variability, learning from volatility, and using stress as information for improvement. Mental rehearsal prepares you for challenging situations by practicing your responses in imagination. Elite athletes, military personnel, and other high-performance professionals use visualization to prepare for pressure situations. Mental rehearsal doesn't guarantee success, but it increases the likelihood of performing well under stress. The goal of building mental resilience is not to become invulnerable to difficulties, but to maintain your capacity for clear thinking, ethical behavior, and effective action, even when facing significant challenges. Resilience allows you to be fully human, experiencing the full range of human emotions, while maintaining your ability to function and flourish. True mental resilience integrates all aspects of human functioning: cognitive, emotional, physical, social, and spiritual. It's not about suppressing parts of yourself, but about developing all parts of yourself to work together effectively, even under pressure. This creates authentic strength that can handle whatever life presents. Chapter 14. The Critical Thinking Toolkit for Life Mastery. Critical thinking is not just an academic exercise or professional skill. It's a comprehensive approach to living that affects every aspect of your existence. When you master critical thinking, you gain tools that transform how you make decisions, build relationships, manage money, approach health, pursue goals, and navigate the complexities of modern life. Career and professional development benefit enormously from critical thinking skills. Instead of following conventional career advice or accepting industry assumptions, critical thinkers analyze their strengths, interests, and market opportunities systematically. They recognize that career paths are not predetermined and that conventional wisdom about job security and advancement may be outdated. Critical thinking reveals that most career advice is based on past conditions rather than future realities. The advice to get good grades, find a stable job, and work for 30 years until retirement worked in an industrial economy, but may be counterproductive in a knowledge economy characterized by rapid change and entrepreneurial opportunities. Financial decision-making improves dramatically when you apply critical thinking principles. Most people make money decisions based on emotion, social pressure, or marketing manipulation. Critical thinkers examine the actual costs and benefits of financial choices, understand the psychological biases that affect money decisions, and build systems that automate good financial behaviors. Investment decisions require particularly strong critical thinking skills because financial markets are full of misinformation, conflicts of interest, and cognitive traps. Understanding the difference between correlation and causation helps you avoid investment strategies based on false patterns. Recognizing survivorship bias prevents you from copying strategies that worked for visible winners while ignoring invisible losers. Relationship decisions become clearer when you apply critical thinking to understanding yourself and others. Instead of relying on chemistry, wishful thinking, or social expectations, you can evaluate compatibility based on values, life goals, communication styles, and behavioral patterns over time. Critical thinking helps you recognize the difference between attraction and compatibility, between potential and reality, between what people say and what they do. This doesn't make relationships less magical or meaningful. It makes them more likely to be genuinely fulfilling rather than based on illusions. Health and wellness decisions benefit from critical thinking that cuts through the massive amounts of conflicting and often contradictory information about diet, exercise, supplements, and medical treatments. Understanding how to evaluate scientific evidence, recognize marketing manipulation, and distinguish between correlation and causation helps you make better health choices. Parenting applications of critical thinking involve teaching children how to think rather than just what to think. This includes modeling intellectual humility, encouraging questions, teaching evaluation of sources, and helping children learn to think independently while respecting legitimate authority. Consumer decisions improve when you understand the psychological techniques used to influence purchasing behavior. Critical thinkers recognize anchoring effects in pricing, social proof in marketing, scarcity tactics in sales, and authority effects in endorsements. This doesn't eliminate all consumption, but makes it more conscious and aligned with actual needs and values. Political engagement becomes more productive when you apply critical thinking to evaluate policies, candidates, and political information. This involves understanding your own political biases, seeking out diverse perspectives, focusing on policy outcomes rather than partisan loyalty, and recognizing the limitations of political solutions to complex problems. Media consumption changes dramatically when you develop critical thinking skills for evaluating information sources, recognizing bias, and understanding how business models affect content. Critical thinkers become active consumers of information, rather than passive recipients, choosing their information diet as deliberately as their food diet. Goal setting and achievement benefit from critical thinking approaches that question conventional wisdom about motivation, success, and life planning. Instead of setting goals based on social expectations or motivational cliches, critical thinkers examine their actual values, consider opportunity costs, and design achievement strategies based on evidence rather than inspiration. Time management improves when you apply critical thinking to understand how you actually spend time versus how you think you spend it? What activities produce the most valuable outcomes? And what systems can automate or eliminate low-value activities? Most time management advice is based on assumptions that don't match modern realities. Learning and skill development accelerate when you understand how learning actually works rather than how you think it works. Critical thinking reveals that passive consumption of information creates the illusion of learning without actual competence, that spaced repetition is more effective than cramming, and that testing yourself is more valuable than reviewing notes. Creative pursuits benefit from critical thinking that separates useful creativity techniques from empty inspiration advice. Understanding how creative process actually works, when to generate ideas versus when to evaluate them, and how to overcome creative blocks makes artistic and innovative endeavors more productive and fulfilling. Stress management becomes more effective when you use critical thinking to distinguish between stressors you can control and those you cannot. Identify the root causes of stress rather than just treating symptoms, and evaluate stress management techniques based on evidence rather than popularity. Habit formation and behavior change improve when you understand the psychology of habits, the role of environment in behavior, and the difference between motivation-based change and system-based change. Critical thinking reveals why most behavior change attempts fail and how to design approaches that actually work. Conflict resolution benefits from critical thinking approaches that focus on understanding different perspectives, identifying underlying interests rather than stated positions, and finding creative solutions that address everyone's core concerns rather than compromising on surface positions. Decision-making under uncertainty improves when you understand probability, can distinguish between risk and uncertainty, know when to gather more information versus when to act with incomplete data, and can update your beliefs based on new evidence rather than defending previous decisions. The compound effects of applying critical thinking across all areas of life create exponential improvements over time. Better financial decisions compound into wealth. Better relationship decisions compound into fulfilling partnerships. Better health decisions compound into vitality. Better career decisions compound into professional success. Critical thinking doesn't guarantee perfect outcomes because you're operating in a complex, uncertain world where luck and circumstances beyond your control play important roles. But it dramatically improves your odds of achieving the outcomes you actually want, rather than the outcomes others expect you to want. The goal is not to become a perfectly rational calculating machine, but to become a wise human being who can navigate complexity with clarity, make decisions aligned with your authentic values, and build a life of genuine meaning and satisfaction. Critical thinking provides the tools. You provide the wisdom to use them well. Chapter 15. Becoming Unstoppable. Your critical thinking transformation. You now possess something that 99% of people will never have: a comprehensive understanding of how your mind works, how to think clearly, and how to make decisions that create the life you actually want, rather than the life that happens to you by default. But knowledge without application is worthless. The question now is whether you will use these tools to transform your thinking and your life, or whether you will return to the mental habits that have kept you trapped in mediocrity. The journey from unconscious thinking to critical thinking mastery is not easy. It requires confronting comfortable illusions, questioning beliefs you've held for years, and accepting that much of what you thought you knew might be wrong. It requires intellectual humility in a world that rewards overconfidence. patience in a culture obsessed with instant results, and systematic effort in an environment that promotes impulsive reactions. Most people will choose comfort over growth. They will listen to this information, nod their heads in agreement, and then return to the same thinking patterns that have always produced the same results. They will blame external circumstances for their problems rather than examining their own thinking processes. They will seek easy answers rather than developing the mental discipline necessary for real transformation. But you are not most people. If you were, you wouldn't have persisted through 15 chapters of challenging material designed to fundamentally change how you think. You have demonstrated the intellectual curiosity and mental discipline that separates the few who grow from the many who stagnate. The transformation begins with commitment, not just emotional commitment based on temporary motivation, but systematic commitment backed by daily practices and life structure changes. Critical thinking mastery is not achieved through occasional moments of clear thinking, but through consistent application of clear thinking principles over months and years. Start with awareness. For the next 30 days, pay attention to your thinking processes throughout each day. Notice when you make assumptions without checking them. Observe when emotions influence your reasoning. Catch yourself using cognitive shortcuts that might be leading you astray. Awareness is the foundation of all improvement. Question everything, especially your own beliefs and assumptions. What do you believe that might be wrong? What assumptions are you making that might be false? What would you need to see to change your mind about important positions? This intellectual humility creates space for growth and learning. Build systems that support clear thinking rather than relying on willpower and motivation. Structure your environment to minimize distractions. Create information systems that expose you to high-quality, diverse perspectives. Design decision-making processes that force you to slow down and think carefully about important choices. Seek out people who think clearly and challenge you intellectually. The quality of your thinking is heavily influenced by the quality of thinking among people you interact with regularly. Surround yourself with people who value truth over comfort, growth over security, and intellectual honesty over social conformity. Practice the specific techniques you've learned. Use mental models to analyze complex situations. Apply logical reasoning to evaluate arguments. Implement decision-making frameworks for important choices. Run experiments to test your assumptions. These skills improve with practice and deteriorate without use. Document your thinking and track your results. Keep a decision journal that records your reasoning and predictions so you can learn from both successes and failures. Track which mental models prove most useful in different situations. Notice which biases affect you most strongly and develop specific strategies to counteract them. Embrace uncertainty and complexity rather than seeking simple answers to complex questions. The world is genuinely complicated, and most important questions don't have easy answers. Learning to be comfortable with ambiguity and nuance makes you more effective in a complex world. Learn from your mistakes rather than defending them. Every error in thinking is an opportunity to improve your mental processes. When you make bad decisions, analyze what went wrong in your thinking rather than blaming external circumstances. This turns failures into learning experiences that make future failures less likely. Teach others what you've learned. Explaining critical thinking concepts to other people forces you to understand them more deeply and helps you identify gaps in your own knowledge. Teaching also contributes to a world with better thinking, which benefits everyone. Stay curious and keep learning. Critical thinking is not a destination but a lifelong journey of mental development. New situations will challenge your thinking in ways you haven't experienced before. Continuing to learn and grow keeps your thinking sharp and adaptable. The compound effects of improved thinking are extraordinary. Better thinking leads to better decisions. Better decisions lead to better outcomes. Better outcomes create more opportunities. More opportunities enable bigger decisions. This creates a virtuous cycle that accelerates over time. People who master critical thinking often find that their entire lives transform in ways they never anticipated. Their careers advance because they can solve problems others cannot. Their relationships improve because they understand themselves and others more clearly. Their finances grow because they make better money decisions. Their health improves because they can evaluate health information effectively. But the most profound transformation is not in external outcomes but in internal experience. When you know how to think clearly, you become less anxious because you can accurately assess real versus imagined threats. You become more confident because your confidence is based on realistic self-assessment rather than wishful thinking. You become more peaceful because you accept what you cannot control while focusing energy on what you can influence. You become genuinely free in a way that most people never experience. Free from the manipulation of others who would exploit your cognitive biases. Free from the tyranny of your own unconscious mental patterns. Free from the fear that comes with not understanding how your own mind works. This freedom is not the absence of constraints, but the presence of choice. When you understand how your mind works, you can choose how to think rather than being controlled by automatic mental processes. When you understand how persuasion works, you can choose what to believe rather than being manipulated by clever marketers and politicians. When you understand how decisions actually affect outcomes, you can choose your path rather than drifting wherever circumstances take you. The world needs people who can think clearly. In an age of information overload, echo chambers, and deliberate misinformation, critical thinking skills are not just personal advantages, but civic responsibilities. Every person who learns to think clearly makes the world slightly more rational, slightly more truthful, and slightly more capable of solving complex problems. Your critical thinking journey starts now. Not tomorrow when you feel more motivated. Not next week when you have more time. Not next month when circumstances are more favorable. Right now, with the next thought you think and the next decision you make, the choice is yours. You can return to unconscious thinking patterns and wonder why your life doesn't change. Or you can commit to the lifelong practice of clear thinking and discover what becomes possible when you master the most important skill any human being can develop. Your mind is the most powerful tool you will ever possess. Now you know how to use it. The question is, will you?